Hi, my name is Nurul Rauhah Zaini, and today my group and I will be discussing about the making of the English Bible that we know of now today. So, we all know that English Bible is a common thing. We can see Christians holding English Bibles for their prayers or just as a form of reading. But did you know that there was a time when English Bible is not a thing? In fact, it was even banned in England. Yes, it is true. English Bibles were banned back then. During the 14th century, in England, the Bible were initially written in Latin. Yes, in Latin. And only scholars, priests, popes who can understand Latin can actually read the Bible directly. Layman people never actually read the Bible directly because usually layman people don't learn Latin. So it is exactly impossible for layman people to understand what is actually in the Bible. So if it's written in Latin, why didn't anyone ever try to translate it? Well, that is because translating Bible back then was seen as heresy and blasphemous. Back then, the church is actually seen as the leader of the country. So by translating the Bible, it is seen as though you are trying to fight against the church. That is why translating the Bible is seen as illegal. Until came a scholar named John Wycliffe. John Wycliffe actually disagreed that the Bible should only be written in Latin and also be read out in Latin. He felt as though the Bible should be more accessible to layman people, because if more people know the words of God, then more people will believe in God. Thus, in 1380, Wycliffe secretly organized the first Latin to English Bible with the help of few other translators. Wycliffe then sent people to read out his translation to the people of England so that English people can now understand directly the words of God. Wycliffe's translation actually set out the beginning of the battle for the language of Bible. Of course, in the end, the church knows about it, and they held the trial in 1380. The trial was held by various scholars and bishops to examine Wycliffe's translation. After the trial, they came to the conclusion that his translation is seen as heresy and blasphemy. Wycliffe and the people who worked with him were then persecuted, and English Bible were then banned from all England. In 1384, Wycliffe died due to stroke not long after the ban. It may seem as though English Bible has no hope anymore in England, but it didn't last long. Let's talk about King Henry V. In 1417, King Henry actually campaigned throughout France. Throughout the early 15th century, he would then speak to the French people in English instead of French. He would then continue to write in English even after when he returned to England. Thus, he decided to create a standardized English for all England to understand. And of course, that also includes the Bible. The Chancery were given the responsibility to create a standardized English that can be understood by the whole people of England. But unfortunately, English Bible didn't get to last very long due to under the reign of King Henry VIII. King Henry promised the Pope that English Bible was still banned and illegal in England. Of course, there are still people who believe that England should have an English Bible. Then come William Tyndale. He's a scholar who also have the same ideology as John Wycliffe. To avoid being caught by the church, he left the country and began translating his own translation. He then made a lot of copies of those Bibles to be smuggled into England. Of course, when the church found out, they were not happy. In 1536, hired assassins were sent to capture Tyndale so that he can be imprisoned. And in 1536, Tyndale was found guilty of heresy and was hanged to death. But then suddenly, not long after Tyndale's death, King Henry VIII was in support of a new church. This is due to him wanting to divorce his wife, Catherine of Aragon. Thus, he authorized multiple English Bibles to be brought into England. English Bibles are now no longer banned in England. By the end of 16th century, King James I ordered to have a standardized English Bible to avoid confusion within the citizens. This is because there were too many English translations of the Bible. The standardized Bible that was ordered by him is the Bible that we now know of as King James Bible of 1611. The words in the Bible were mostly influenced by Windows translations.
Thank you, Rauhah, for the brief explanation on the history. As we know, in the 14th century, there was a battle for the language of Bible. This battle of the language began because the people who spoke in English wanted the Bible to be in their language, as they were not able to understand and read the Bible due to its Latin language. Hence, the prime mover for this battle of language of the Bible was John Wycliffe. Who is John Wycliffe? John Wycliffe was an English scholar, a philosopher, and a theologian who was very familiar with the Bible, as he was a biblical translator during the 14th century. He was also very fluent in Latin. And the most interesting fact about John Wycliffe is that he had his own principle or belief where everyone has the right to read Bible. Besides, he was also known as an important predecessor to Protestantism, where he strongly opposed the idea of the church having full power and authority in all aspects of people's life. Moving on to the factors that influenced Wycliffe to translate the Bible. So the first factor is that only the clergy were allowed to read the Bible, and this obviously contradicts to his belief where every man in this world has the right to read the Bible. The second factor is that the clergy in the Catholic Church only use Latin language in their hymns and prayers, thus there is no way for other people to understand it. The third factor is that ordinary people did not understand the meaning of Bible. And the fourth factor is that the church had corrupting the Bible's reading, exploited and plundered people, teaching false doctrines and also selling indulgence. And the fifth factor on why Wycliffe translated the Bible is that because of his belief, where he believed that it had been better if the people understood the Bible best in their own tongue. Now, let us move on to the characteristics of Wycliffe Bible. So Wycliffe Bible still have the origin and familiar phrases of the Latin words such as barbarian and communication. It's important to note that they did a translation word by word so they could preserve the quality of the text. For example, the word Symbelium Tiniens in Latin had turned into Symbol Tinklish in the Wycliffe Bible. Wycliffe Bible also has the characteristics of the East Midland dialect of English, which became the basis of the dialect of London. And it is important and interesting to note that there were two versions of Wycliffe Bible, which are the earliest version by Wycliffe himself and the latest version by John Purvis. Now, here are some examples of the words that they use. As we can see here, the Old English form of Y was unrounded to I in the Midland English. And in the latest version, the Y remained. And to make it more clear, here is a comparison that we can look into. As seen on the example before, English in the Wycliffe Bible shows the characteristics of the East Midland English, which became the basis of Standard English used in the 15th century. Back to the year of 1382, Wycliffe had completed the translation of the Latin Bible into the English vernacular of his day, and his Bible was the bestseller during that time. However, his Bible got condemned and has been considered as heretical by the Church and Synod.
Hi, I'm Kasih. Let's get moving to the chancery role in creating official English spellings. In the 15th century, Helmi broke 350 royal traditions. After his victory in winning famous battles in French territory while campaigning around the northern France by writing his dispatches home in English. That was quite a bizarre move considering that all court documents at the time was written in French since the Norman conquest. The English letters are said to be a deliberate propaganda, and his motive might be related to the exploitation of anti-French. By continuing to write in English, he made the first major step in creating an official standardized English that could be read by all. The Signet Office stores the personal letters on behalf of the monarch carrying the royal seal, and once Henry decreed that the Signet Office should use English, it was inevitable that the whole nation would do the same. The main problem is, which English? Across the nation, people speak a variety of dialects and leading them to have difficulty in understanding each other. For instance, the North said stain or stien, while the South people call it stone. The ing participle in running is called ranan in the North, ranend in the East Midlands, and ranin in the West Midlands.
In the South, they call it as stone, while in the North, they call it as stain.
This is nothing compared to the variety of spellings, considering that England used Latin and French as written language, hence why there is none common linguistic standard on how to spell words.
Some of the region called church, church, and some of the region called church, kirk. So the word kirk have different spellings too, which are K-Y-R-K-E, kirk, K-Y-R-K, and K-R-R-K-E. Same goes to the word church. So they have a lot of spellings such as C-H-U-R-C-H-E, C-H-E-R-C-H-E, and also C-H-U-R-C-K.
Henry commands the Chancery, or the civil service we call it today, to create a common written language. The Chancery then creates hundreds of new decisions on how to make the word formations and its spelling to be adopted. Words like I used to be spelled I-C-H-E has found its modern form under the Chancery. More examples like right to write, thus to thus, and hat to has. The language then starts to become more recognizable to us, but even with its same spelling, it didn't change the fact the language to become more logical. Here's a poem in response to why English is so hard and it's being taught to the kids. We'll begin with a box, and the plural is boxes, but the plural of ox is oxen, not oxes. Then one foal is goose, but two are called geese. Yet the plural of moose should never be meese. And it goes on and on and on. Around the time the English was being standardized, there was much debate going around on what's the best way to spell things. The reformers said that it should be spelled according to how they're pronounced, but the traditionalists say that it should be spelled in one of the ways it always be. The most of the spellings itself are from the mother nature of English and the accents used centuries ago. Some are just deliberate. For instance, rhyme had a H because rhythm had one, and the word from Greek origins is adjusted with an additional H to words like throne and theatre.
William Tyndale, he was an Oxford educated and an ordained priest, a legend that we should remember the name of. His contribution does not only help to elevate the Christianity, but also the English language that we know today. This young man was only 29 years old when he first started his journey in transitioning the Latin written Bible into an English written Bible. Anyway, little did he know that it will also be the end of him. However, maybe the blood was worth the spill, because as we can see how the dynamic of the English usage changes from only being a street language into a language that can be used in a holy scripture too. His work bring a radical change into the English language and English society. As mentioned in the beginning of my speech, this young priest started his preach at the St. Austin's Green, which happened to be in front of the church. Tyndale had a lot of influence in his time, but of course not as much as William Shakespeare. When Cleric II challenged this young man, he immediately got a hang on to the Holy Scripture of Bible. One thing you should know about why England is so overprotective over their Latin written Bible is because Latin wasn't just used for their religion usage, but also for their official authorities. That is why they were so protected over it. Unfortunately, Latin was not known by many of the people, English people I meant. They are not fluent in it and they can't even understand because it is hard for them. So in order for Tyndale to change and transition the Holy Scripture in peace, he had to flee abroad in 1524 and finally settle down in Cologne, Germany. This competent young man starts his work with not the Latin Bible, but with the original Hebrew and Greek written Bible. After just 2 years of fleeing abroad, Tyndale was able to get 6,000 of this copy printed, the copy that was translated into English Bible, printed and successfully smuggled into England. Poor Tyndale, as Henry VIII and Cardinal Wolsey was placed as spies, and they immediately alerted the English kingdom. England started to place a tight security to everything that enters England. Finally, in 1535, Tyndale was finally imprisoned. Even in his last day, he still requested for his original scripture of Hebrew and Greek Bible so that he can continue his work. When he was finally sentenced to strangle and burn to death, his last word was, "Lord, open the King of England's eye." That happened in August 1536. His prayer must have been heard by the God, as King Henry VIII starts confrontation with the Pope right after his divorce with Catherine of Aragon. Sad for the fact that the king does accept the Bible right after his death. However, a change is still a change, and he was able to make the change that we know until today. 85% of the King James's Bible was adapted from Tyndale's pen. Many phrases that we know and use today came from him. Some of the iconic examples such as "keep good," "let there be light," "fight the good," "the power," "my brother's keeper," "tie sick unto death," "flowing with milk and honey," "the apple of my eye," "a man of my own heart," "the spirit is willing but the faith is weak," "sign of the time," "year of little faith," "eat, drink and be merry for tomorrow we die," "fisherman," "landlady," "seashore," "book," "taskmaster," "viper," "zealous," "a prophet who has no honor in his own land," "a stranger in a strange land," and "let my people go." Thank you for all these individual and even constitution, which are John Wycliffe, the Court of Chancery, William Tyndale, and some of them even burned to death to fight for the right of helping the people to understand the Holy Scripture. And of course, not to forget a massive gratitude for King James as he changed the Tyndale's translated Bible deliberately with some of the archaic language's word, on the purpose of the Bible to sound a lot more like a language standard from the God himself. The Bible in today's world is not only understandable, but it's very poetic, elegant and graceful. That is all from our group. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum.